Some 25 miles north of Beirut, Jebeil, formerly Byblos, embodies the country's sentimental memory. According to ancestral legend, it is the oldest city in the world, where the god El founded the first city of Phoenicia and built a rampart around it. For the archaeologist Hareth Bustani, as for all Lebanese, Byblos is one of those places you could wander round forever, pondering its myths.
It's from here, from the top of the keep of the citadel of Byblos, that you have the best view of the succession of civilizations of the oldest stone-built town in the world. What we see reappearing here is the history of our history. It is our memory, the memory of this people whose origins go back more than 1,000 years. It all began here, around this source of water, which is magical and biblical, and at the same time human. People converged around water, the essence of life and spirituality. Here, the first settlement in the history of this town was established. With a little imagination, we can picture the women with their earthenware jars coming to draw water from this well, and continuing to do so for 8,000 years. This well served generations and generations of this city's inhabitants, up until the 20th century. Of course, in the 20th century, the excavations began, and this area was placed out of bounds. The well had dried up and had to be abandoned.
Few cities have fired the archaeologist's imagination as much as this, the site of the mythological love affair between Adonis and Venus. In 1860, the Frenchman Ernest Renan identified the site from ancient manuscripts and embarked on the first surveys. But the revelations about the town's illustrious past came to light in 1921 under the first blows of Egyptologist Pierre Montet's pick. But it was thanks to the efforts of archaeologist Maurice Dunin that the site has now been almost completely unearthed, after half a century of excavations. From the dawn of the 3rd millennium BC, the city was organized, with stone houses grouped along narrow streets. In the center of the city, this people of intrepid seafarers built the great temple of Balat Gubal, the shrine of the Lady of Byblos, dedicated to their guardian goddess. Equipped with 2 ports, one in the south, the other in the north, Byblos became a prosperous city. Surrounded by its strong walls, the town bustled with activity, and its shops were soon bursting with products from the entire Mediterranean basin.
Now this life that had begun to develop in the 3rd millennium was about to explode. It was also the time of the first contact with other civilizations, such as the Egyptians, and of the first trade exchanges, as evidenced by the tombs and in the Egyptian hieroglyphs. This relationship was to last for 3,000 years.
Wedged between Mesopotamia and Egypt, Phoenicia soon became the hub of Mediterranean trade. But its true wealth resided in a tree, which was to come to symbolize its identity, the cedar, whose majestic silhouette once covered the mountainsides. For centuries, the cedar was highly prized by the pharaohs for the construction of their ships and temples, but especially for its resin, so vital for the mummification ritual. We no longer sail to Byblos. How will we obtain the pines whose products we use to bury the pure, whose oils we use to embalm the great? The Egyptians complained at the end of the 3rd millennium. history sometimes takes inexplicable turns. The Egypt of the pharaohs suddenly entered a phase when the contacts with the Levant were brusquely interrupted. Byblos was then destroyed, sometime around the year 2200 BC, according to archaeologists. But at the dawn of the second millennium, the city rose out of its ashes like a phoenix and rebuilt its shrines. A little temple, probably dedicated to the god Resheph, its forest of obelisks soaring upwards like fervent prayers. From the foundations of this shrine, Maurice Dunant excavated hundreds of statuettes of warriors with pinched waists, conical headdresses, and tapering bodies. The worshipper placed them on a stone altar, but when there was no space, the priest hid them away in huge earthenware jars. Covered with a thin layer of gold, which in Egypt was the mark of the gods, they were probably the work of the bronze craftsmen of Byblos. Fragile as matchsticks, slender as Giacometti figures, they symbolize the ambiguity of this Phoenician art, veering between that of Egypt and that of Asia Minor. On the 16th of February 1922, Byblos suffered a terrible flood which produced a giant landslide. A crack appeared in the rocky wall, and Pierre Montet discovered the royal necropolis. Although looters had already visited some of these tombs and stripped the sarcophagi bare, two had remained intact, revealing their fabulous treasure. Diplomatic gifts imported from Egypt, opulent Egyptian-style jewels. Local goldsmiths were quick to copy the illustrious models of their powerful neighbors for the elite of their own society. But the most valuable discovery in the eyes of the scientific community was undoubtedly that of the sarcophagus of King Ahiram, the ruler of Byblos, thought to have lived in the 10th century BC. Awe-inspiring, supported by the forms of 4 rampant lions, the coffin provides a detailed account of a royal burial. Weeping women rend their bodices, lacerate their breasts, and tear their hair as a sign of mourning, while a solemn procession advances towards the king, sitting on his throne flanked by winged sphinxes. But the uniqueness of this sarcophagus resides not in its ornamentation, but in the long inscription engraved on the coffin and the edge of the lid. It is in fact the most ancient coherent text in linear alphabetic writing that has survived. It was actually this alphabet that the Phoenicians spread throughout the Levant and beyond, from the 9th century BC. These 22 characters were used for writing Aramaic as well as Hebrew, Greek, and the languages of Transjordan. The source of most of the alphabets currently used in the world, it was the instrument of navigators, merchants, and poets. Around the Mediterranean rim, the cities of the Phoenician coast developed a string of colonies: Cadiz, Utica, Motia, and Carthage. But the wealth of Phoenicia soon aroused the envy of its powerful neighbors. In the 6th century, following the invasions of the Assyrians and Babylonians, it was the Persians' turn to subdue the Phoenician cities, one by one.